Welcome to the Comic Sauce Podcast, where we talk comics and comics culture. I am Henry Liu, and today I am joined by Christian Diadamo. Christian, how are you doing?
Hidely ho, Henry. I'm doing fine and doodly.
Excellent. Still in Ned Flanders mode, I see. Excellent.
Yes,
I'm also
indeedly.
I am also joined by Porfirio Rangel. Porfirio, how goes?
I'm good, Henry. Happy to be here.
Awesome. Today is October 14th, 2022, and we're going to talk She-Hulk. She-Hulk, Attorney at Law, season 1 just finished. And when I say just finished, it really just finished yesterday, October 13th. So this is hot off the presses, fresh out of the oven, and we're going to get into it. So with She-Hulk, like we often do, we can talk expectations. So, yeah, what were your expectations going into this season? She-Hulk is a bit of a lesser known Marvel character, and there's never been a She-Hulk live action portrayal in movies or TV. So this is a new thing, right? How did you feel going into this season? How about you, Porfirio? You want to start off here?
Yeah, so, when She-Hulk was first announced, I was really happy because, like you said, Henry, like there's never been a She-Hulk project. Like, she's been exists in the comics for so long. She's been a, active Avengers member within the comics, but she's never like been talked about like in the mainstream media, like on TV or um on the films or anything like this. So when they was announced that there's gonna be a She-Hulk TV show, I was ecstatic. I was like, yay, yay, finally. And and then when the first trailer came out, I think I was like, like had the same reaction as the general public, that I was just not convinced with the CGI they had to make the actress um you know the green monster. I wasn't convinced, and it just looked really kind of like all like the previous MCU Disney Plus content, just kind of like family friendly humor. So I didn't have that much high expectations, but I guess because of that, like when I started watching the show, like I was LOLing so hard, and I was like really invested into it from like the first or second episode. Um, but I really enjoyed it. Yeah.
Cool. How about you, Christian? What were your expectations for She-Hulk?
Let's see. So I guess growing up, I've never really read much She-Hulk outside of like She-Hulk in like team ups and things like that. I've always kind of been aware that she's been like she's the attorney at law, um, and has like it's a much more comedic take with a lot of fourth wall breaking jokes. Um, and think I saw this goes back to when I was a kid, but there was an Incredible Hulk show in the '90s. I checked out a little bit here and there on like syndication. I think it was on like Fox at the time, and She-Hulk was part of that. Um, and she was cool. This goes back a ways, so I don't remember that much from the show. Um, but I think that was like around that was how I was first introduced to the character. So I was actually excited to see what they were going to do with her in the MCU. I think that this could have been like a fresh new take, as well as I think kind of the culmination a bit of the Disney Plus stuff in Phase 4. This is the last Phase 4 Disney Plus series, and I think the way it was teased, they also had a lot of cameos. They teased Daredevil, they teased Wong, Abomination, And so like I thought, okay, let's see what they do with this. Let's see if this is quote unquote like the big Avengers finish for the Disney Plus like shows that have come out over the past couple years. And and so I was very curious going in, but I think my reaction ended up being I think a little more mixed than I wanted it to be.
Got it. Right on. Okay, on my end, yeah, I too wasn't a huge fan of She-Hulk in the comics and was really just kind of peripherally aware of her storylines. Um, yeah, so on that level, I wasn't like super psyched to start watching this show. I will say this though, I was and continue to be a big fan of Tatiana Maslany. She was absolutely phenomenal in this show called Orphan Black. Highly, highly recommend that show. I watched the whole thing and it's great. And she is astounding in it. She's really great in it. So when I heard they had cast her for She-Hulk, that got me excited for the show. So for no other reason, I wanted to see her in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And just one more note on Orphan Black. If anyone is a fan of Oscar Isaac's performance in Moon Knight, watch Orphan Black because Orphan Black in that show Tatiana Maslany basically does what Oscar Isaac does on Moon Knight, but like times 10. She plays like a whole bunch more characters, and like she basically plays clones of herself, and each clone has a different personality, and it's the same actress, but the differences and the nuances between the characters is really phenomenal. So I can't say enough about that. So yeah, on that level, I was looking forward to She-Hulk very much. I wanted to see what she could bring to the table. So now season 1 is in the books, a 9-episode season. We've all watched it, and now we can talk about it. So let's give the spoiler alert for She-Hulk, and yeah, we'll be getting into plot points and whatnot. So you've been warned. Okay, let's get into the show. So let's start off with the pros. What was good about the show? I know, Porfirio, before we started recording, you were mentioning how you did enjoy the show. What are some of the specifics of what you enjoyed about the show?
I think what I loved about the show is the whole like fourth wall breaking, how like it was, I think Christian used these words when I first described it. It felt like a superhero sitcom, like it didn't feel um like there was like, like huge stakes at huge like problems at stake, like Avengers level Earth being threatened, whatever. It was like just cool like street level kind of issues, or even like Peter Parker kind of issues of like fight like dating or paying the bills and finding a job while being a hero. And then the fourth wall just like gave it like an additional layer of humor, especially like when it kind of like addressed issues that exist on a fandom level, like how the toxic the toxic level of fandoms of like people being like, oh, like a She-Hulk, like, like what happened to Hulk or whatever, and like, that's so funny because the show does address that, and just like how female characters, black characters, gay characters, there's always like this like narrative of like, oh, if it's not like a white male straight character like Thor or Iron Man or Captain America, then it's like somehow um woke, it's like, oh, like stop putting like your political agenda in my face, and I feel like the show, because of the fourth wall breaking, like addresses that issue like head on. And so for me, that was a big um added humor on my part. Like, and it wasn't like in your face kind of storyline either. It was just like generally funny. I thought it was really funny.
Yeah, that's a good point. It does address a lot of timely of the moment kind of stuff, but um, it handles it in a very comedic way, so it doesn't like hit you over the head with stuff, right? But I think, yeah, you said a lot there, and I think we'll definitely talk more about the toxic fanboy stuff and just a lot of what you mentioned. But how about you, Christian? What did you like about the show?
Yeah, I think actually one bit I kind of want to expand on. I guess you were talking about Tatiana Maslany, Henry, and how she put in a really great performance as She-Hulk. And I did really like her. I thought she was a very relatable protagonist. And she's someone in her 30s who has to deal with a career and trying to date online in their 30s. Um, while like also trying to have like a social life and like going to her parents. I did find like her performance and the character to be very relatable. And like you see her struggles and like there I think one of the best episodes of it, episode 7, which is the one where she goes to the Abominations like therapy circle and goes to his like retreat.
Hmm.
She gets ghosted by a guy, and that makes her feel really, really bad. And her whole like thing is like she's waiting for a text from him because she really wants this relationship to work. And I think one of the best moments of the series is her in the circle and how she like really opens up about her struggle, about like how what this really meant to her, that this Josh, the guy that she was dating, and how he ghosted her, how that made her feel, how she's kind of worked around it, and she was like talking to the other members. And I think that was a really like great like emotional beat for the show. Um, and I also think she played pretty well off some of the other kind of more zanier characters and moments. I did enjoy like some of the setups for some of the more sitcom aspects where you she has her client who does something really stupid that might be a Z-list hero like Leapfrog in the episode after episode 8, and how they want to be a superhero but they're bad at it and they do something zany and kind of stupid, and she has to like work around that in court. I think that's I think what really worked for me is kind of her general arc as She-Hulk and some of the more like workplace comedy, sitcom elements.
Right on. And I do agree. I also enjoyed Tatiana Maslany in this show. I think she's great. Um, she really flexed her acting chops on Orphan Black, but she impressed in a very different way on this show. She's just incredibly charismatic, and we've already been talking about it, like all three of us. But um, you're really rooting for her. She's very relatable, and she's just dealing with like everyday kind of stuff, like uh, trying to get her career together and struggling on this dating app, and just a lot of stuff that anyone goes through. Not just superheroes, right? Very much in line with Marvel, right? Marvel characters are lovable for these reasons. And yeah, she's great in it. And yeah, Porfirio, you're talking about this. I totally agree with this. Also, the show's very funny. It's more than anything a comedy, and it's a particular brand of comedy. It's kind of a sitcom slash rom-com kind of comedy. Um, but I think for the most part, the comedy does work. And all the stuff with the dating app is really hilarious to me. like I said, it's very relatable. She's just trying to get a date, trying to find love out there. And yeah, just setting up her profile and swiping and on all that is great. And later in the season, she actually uses the dating app stuff as a legal defense too. So I love how they tied all that together, and it just made for a lot of great comedic moments. Um, just a few other tidbits here. We talk about this a lot. How faithful is the show to the comics? I'm not super familiar with the comics, but I do know for a fact that She-Hulk in the comics has a history of breaking the fourth wall and being meta. So all this stuff a lot of people are talking about with this show is straight from the comics. The comics did do this very thing, right? There are many She-Hulk covers where she's talking directly to the viewer. So that's cool. It's definitely faithful. I thought the She-Hulk costume was cool. It's kind of a it kind of looks like a gym outfit, or maybe like a wrestling singlet. But I think it works. It looks cool, and again, it is reminiscent of She-Hulk costumes that we've seen in the comics. One other thing I wanted to bring up, I think we may have alluded to it already, but there are MCU tie-ins here. Other characters in the Marvel Cinematic Universe do show up. We see Wong, we see Abomination, we see Daredevil, and of course we do see the Hulk himself, right? So I thought there were a lot of great moments with these crossovers. A lot of times these things happen as strictly for fan service and maybe not much substance behind them, but I thought these crossovers work pretty well here in the show.
Mhm.
All right. Porfirio, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, continuing off Christian's idea, like, I really did enjoy, like, because Jen Walker's is a lawyer and everything, like the whole, like, how she was inside the superhero division of her law firm, and I thought it would have been cool to see, like, every episode being like a new superhero case or something. Like, her first one was a big high profile one, Abomination. Then, like you said, there's Leapfrog, and that immortal guy.
Oh
Um
yeah, yeah.
he's he's a mutant, isn't he?
Oh yeah, I forget his name, but I heard he is a mutant.
Uh-huh. And I wish the show kind of explored that a little bit more, like been a little bit like, like kind of like, I don't know, what's a court show like?
Like Law and Order.
Yeah, like Law and Order, like every episode being like a new case or something with like a different superhero. um I thought that would have been cool, but I still like the direction that they're going in. And there was even an episode where they reference like how like the Sokovia Accords were repealed, you know.
Right. Yeah, I
Oh,
remember when I heard that, I was like, oh, I didn't know this was official. So I guess it's officially no
Yeah.
longer a thing, huh?
So yeah, so that's all been fine and dandy.
Right on. Okay, so clearly there are definitely aspects to the show we enjoyed, a lot of positives. What about negatives? Are there anything? Are there any aspects of the show you didn't like so much?
hmm.
Uh, how about you, Christian? You want to start here?
Yeah, so I think what Porfirio was talking about might be a good segue into, I guess, kind of a question I have for you guys about the show. Because Porfirio, you were talking about how you like the courtroom stuff, and
Uh-huh.
like how there was like kind of the zany comedy elements to it.
Mhm.
Um, and I think that kind of leads into, I think, a problem I do have the show. I think the show is a bit of it's like it doesn't know what it wants to be in a sense. Like it wants to do the sitcom stuff, the comedy with the fun court cases with superheroes kind of messing up and having their issues and like kind of going through that in a courtroom setting. We have Kind of the general character arc of She-Hulk herself and Jen, how she has to kind of find herself as the She-Hulk character who's taken a bit of the limelight. Um, and on top of that, you have a villain plot with Intelligentsia, and I guess of course, and then she has her quote unquote arch nemesis, Titania, who kind of shows up here and there as well. Um, and like I think that there's some elements to this I think that work, but do you guys like think like imagine if they picked one or two of those elements? Like would you guys have liked it if say it was just a courtroom drama, very episodic, week to week, zany thing and then it kind of stops and then you have the next thing, courtroom case, it kind of stops. Maybe a little bit of a sprinkle here and there of a bit of a character arc of She-Hulk.
Mhm.
And like it just kind of does that until it ends. It's episodic, so it doesn't maybe a bigger finish with a bigger character in court or something like that. Because I do think that might have been I think that's kind of where something I'm kind of going with was it did feel like plot elements just kind of started and stopped. Titania shows up out of nowhere in episode one, and then she's kind of gone until she shows up again in another episode. And is kind of has a very different motivation. Is completely different. I'm not sure if they actually explained why she busted through the wall of the courtroom in episode one. I might have missed it. I could have just missed that. Intelligentsia is very much in the background. They don't even tell She-Hulk about it. It was like her friends that find out about it until it kind of shows up at the very very end as the big climax. Where in the Abomination's courtroom. And then speaking of which, you also have a bit of a side plot with Abomination, where he has his court case, and then he kind of goes to the retreat that she goes to in episode 7, and then that culminates in the final episode in episode 9, where it finds out he's been hosting Intelligentsia at the retreat.
Mm-hmm.
And it feels like there's like a lot of plot elements that kind of just start, stop, or just kind of show up when they need to show up to move the show forward. And it felt like a bit of like I don't know, it just felt like way too messy. So that's kind of my bit on it. Like, what do you guys think of that? Am I off base here, or do you guys
I
feel that?
Wait,
I
real quick, Porfirio, I think I can address it, at least from my perspective.
I
Now, you posed a question like, you know, essentially, how should you approach this show?
Hmm.
Episodically or as like a single entity, almost like a movie, right?
Yeah.
I think that the best way to approach the show is to approach it episodically, um, because it is kind of set up like a sitcom, like we've been saying, where each episode is self-contained in ways and can be enjoyed that way. Now, there are elements to it where, Titania shows up here and there, Abomination shows up here and there, Intelligentsia shows up here and there, and there is this feel that, oh, it seems like it's building towards something, right? And in that way, it's almost like, well, should I not treat this episodically? Should I treat this as like a big overlying story? And I think, as we find out at the end, we gave the spoiler alert, but spoiler alert for She-Hulk, especially the finale, episode 9, it kind of just throws that all out the window. We'll get deeper into episode 9, and I had some problems with it as well. But I think ultimately they're saying all this stuff we've been building up, we were just fucking with you. Like it's not leading to anything. So just enjoy the show episode by episode and treat it like a sitcom in a sense, or maybe treat it like the old school original Lou Ferrigno show and just watch it episode to episode, and don't get all worked up and try to connect everything into this big master plan, right? It's almost like parodying other Marvel shows, saying um, like all those other shows were trying to build up to this grand finale. We're not doing that here. Just enjoy the show for what it is, episode to episode. So I think in my mind, that's probably the best approach to take with this show. But yeah, sorry, I kind of cut you off, Frio. Did you have something to add there too?
No, I guess like my take would be like would I guess I would have preferred to have had like episodic um like yeah, like a sitcom of like each episode being like its own like court case, and then having like sideline storylines of like, I don't know, like um Titania or like Abomination the Retreat, like being like sideline storylines, and then like that
Mhm.
kind of leading up to like the finale of like Jen like facing them off or something. I kind of would have preferred that because, yeah, now thinking back to it, it just kind of seemed like a lot of this was like built up to nothing, and even the build up was like ridiculous on its own end. Like the whole like retreat and the episodes with Titania, and there was like a wedding episode that for me just felt like was just a really big filler episode.
Yeah,
Um
yeah, yeah.
so I guess I could see it that way. Like I agree with you, Christian, where I see it. I think they should have gone more, yeah, with like having each episode just being like its own like standalone kind of thing with like a small storyline, like probably like in between scenes or like towards the end of the episode.
But that said, Porfirio, don't you think you can, in a way, appreciate each episode as its own thing and like just enjoy it on that level?
Um, like with the season that just aired, like the real season, or
Yeah, yeah.
uh, I mean, I guess you could, but
You still feel that they were connected enough that you couldn't
yeah,
do them standalone?
mm-hmm.
Okay.
Especially like the whole like Abomination, like why he had to go through like, because like when we're first introduced to Abomination, we know him as a villain, from Incredible Hulk and somewhat from Shang-Chi. So,
Yeah.
like there had to be a whole lot of like build up to like, do we trust this guy? Has he um like like reformed into a new person, and what's his retreat? I feel like they like, as a viewer, there's always that little like suspicion, like, can we trust this guy? And even, yeah, like when like Wong is introduced, like uh that was like a whole like yeah, like sideline stuff of like stuff you had to know beforehand. So yeah, I feel like, I guess like yeah, like I I would say like every episode cannot really stand on its own. There are a few episodes that can, like I said, the wedding episode and everything, but I feel like for the majority episodes of the season, like they cannot stand alone unless you have like some prior knowledge of stuff that happened like in the beginning of the season or throughout the season.
Got it. Okay. Okay, so I'll throw out a few things I wasn't uh too jazzed about. Um this has been discussed before, even before the season started, but the CGI on this show, um to me, not great. Yeah, in the trailers, I was like, yeah, it doesn't look quite right to me, but it's just a trailer, so we'll see how it actually looks in the show. And sure enough, it didn't look quite right. um, yeah, I think with the the She-Hulk character when she's in like full on She-Hulk form, it just didn't look realistic. It looked like it was created by a computer. So there is that. And for a show like this, the CGI not being great isn't that critical, because it's more of a comedic show. But I will say this: there were action moments in it, and the CGI being a bit lackluster did make the action scenes suffer a bit. So I think that should be said. If you're going in looking for awesome She-Hulk action, you're probably not going to get what you're looking for here. Um, for me, that's not what the show is about. The show is more about comedy and getting to know the characters in the show. So not a huge negative, but a negative nevertheless. What else here? Yeah, we've been talking a bit about that wedding episode where Jen Walters is a bridesmaid. I'm not sure what happened here, but I'm saying overall the season is really funny and I love the comedy in it. But this season, episode 6, really fell flat. I didn't laugh. I thought it was really corny, and it was very unnecessary,
It
like
was very much a filler episode.
filler episode. Yeah. So like, Porfirio, you're saying how it kind of could stand alone because it had nothing to do with the season. Um, I was referring to the episodes being standalone as a good thing, but this is an episode being standalone as a bad thing. Like, it stood out like a sore thumb, basically. I don't know like what was going on. It had a moment where Titania falls down and like her her teeth break or something, and it's just really silly and goofy, and that was like the level of comedy in it, and just it just didn't really work. And did stick out because, like, I'm telling you, episodes 1 through 5 and then 7 and 8, fantastic. I think I was laughing my ass off. Like, Porfirio, I think you were saying you were laughing a lot. I was laughing a lot throughout the season. Again, we'll get to episode 9 in a bit. But yes, episode 6 and then 9 had some problems with. Yeah. Okay. Maybe we'll just talk about episode 9 now that I just brought it up. So, episode 9, the season finale. This just happened. It just aired yesterday, so it's pretty fresh in our heads. I'm sure a lot of Marvel fans have a lot of strong opinions in both directions for this episode, because this episode was like completely bonkers. Okay, so we're talking about how this show, the whole season, has been very meta, breaking the fourth wall. Jen Walters talks directly to the audience throughout the season. That was already kind of jarring, but it wasn't like it was happening 100% of the time. And like I said earlier, this was something that happened in the comics. She-Hulk does talk to the readers in the comics. So kind of cool nod to the comics. And the fact that Tatiana Maslany is delivering these lines of dialogue, I think made it more palatable because she's so great. And when she talks to the camera, directly into the camera, and I felt like she was talking to me, that was cool. Like, I was like, wow, like, she's great. She's really selling it, right? But episode 9, they take this shit to a whole nother level. We see She-Hulk break out of like the Disney Plus app and go to Marvel Studios, and she goes to the writer's room, and there's this completely off the wall behind the scenes stuff going on here. I thought it was too much. I really did. It didn't ruin the season for me, but it kind of ruined the episode. Like, the episode went way too far in their suspect, I think. Thoughts, Christian? How about you?
Yeah.
Episode 9.
Yeah, I wasn't a big fan of episode 9 either. I think I actually kind of like the way it started. You kind of see her hit rock bottom She loses her job. She has to wear the inhibitor. The world, she's in like she's like been defamed, and how is she going to get back at intelligentsia that's burned her so hard in the last episode? And so, she's living with her parents. She's at kind of her lowest low, and the episode seems to be does build up to like a bit of like a fight with intelligentsia. Um, and it starts throwing more and more elements into the fray in that kind of where retreat that they're at, the Abomination's retreat, which he makes like a surprise appearance. um and so it does feel like it's moving towards your usual Marvel thing, and I think it seems like they really wanted to subvert that, but they take all this time to go into the Marvel Studios to talk to Kevin to like make Marvel jokes, and I think it's like a scene that like I think in a vacuum on its own is fine. Like at She-Hulk, she talks to the writers of the comic book in the comic book, and so this does feel a bit like an extension of something like that. But like because she had never done anything that like far out, this felt way too far out of left field at this point. Like it felt like we were watching a different show at this point, and it did feel like just too much. And I think by the time that that segment resolves, and she says like, I want this changed, I want this changed, I want this changed, I want this changed, okay, we're going to do it this way. But you never actually see her do it that way. You never actually see her resolve the conflict on her own terms, because they kind of spent so much time in the behind the scenes section that when they finally got back to it but you just kind of see the full only the resolution. The episode's over like a couple minutes later. You just have her you see Todd get arrested by the cops, and then she goes into the courtroom to do the case. And I think it felt like there really needed a scene where she's in the courtroom and she gives her big speech. She might piece back the different pieces of intelligentsia of kind of what they did, when they did it, calls people out, calls out Josh, because we haven't really heard from Josh, and that was the guy that ghosted her. And she calls out these different members, and she does tie up the season with a nice little bow. And I think it really needed something like that, because I think while there were some funny jokes and bits in that section, I felt I felt unsatisfied when I finished the episode. I felt like I didn't see it resolve. It all happened off screen.
Great points, Christian. One thing you brought up really resonates with me, and that's the fact that it went too far and it wasn't consistent with breaking the fourth wall earlier in the season, right? We've talked about this on the podcast before, how the logic of a show or movie, even if it's totally bonkers, it's okay if it is consistent with the world you've built, right? So right away in this show, we've established that this is a fourth wall breaking show, like right away. So that's established. But what hadn't been established is She-Hulk going into like real life and talking to She-Hulk writers and going to Marvel Studios, right? That had not been established, and yeah, it was very jarring. And I think you and I agree that it was a bit too far. And real quick before we go to you, Porfirio, a couple of things I forgot. I do appreciate the inventiveness of this episode. I love the attempt, because we've been talking about this a lot, about how the MCU does need to branch out and try new things and take some risks, right? And they certainly did that here. Episode 9, I felt like they kind of maybe came up snake eyes here, but at least they attempted it. I appreciate that. And one other thing, I love the very beginning of the episode where it's an awesome homage to the original Hulk series with Lou Ferrigno. That is so awesome. Like I was like loving it. I love that. and then it kind of went like off the rails, right? But I love that intro. Love it, love it, love it. Okay. Episode 9, Porfirio, what's your take?
When the episode first started, I didn't know. I thought it was just gonna be like a normal She-Hulk episode, just like She-Hulk like fighting the bad guys, like maybe suing them or something, and then like, you know, gain like a good victory lap at the end of the movie. But the whole like like fourth wall breaking, I thought was really genius. Like I yeah, when they went to like the Disney Plus menu, I was like, wait, is something wrong with my TV show or something?
Yep.
Like with my streaming service. So it just caught my attention. I was like, what is going on? Like, where are they going with this? And that just like, yeah, like straight on brought my attention. And then the whole like Kevin Feige character. Does anyone know if that was actually like Kevin talking or
I don't know.
Oh, that's a good question. No, I don't know.
You're definitely meant to think she's gonna talk to Kevin Feige, but then she ends up talking to a robot, right? Which
well,
is
I
pretty
didn't.
funny.
Okay, well, because the thing is, like, I do this every time, but I always watch my stuff in subtitles. So when they were talking about Kevin, like in the writers' room, there was like the whole like abbreviation, like
Oh,
K.E.V.I.N.
interesting.
And so I was like, is this like a typo or something? And then when she went into the Kevin Feige's room, I was like, oh, that makes sense. But yeah, I did. Yeah.
Oh, so you probably weren't made to think that she was going to talk to Kevin Feige himself because you saw his name abbreviated like that.
Yeah, I thought.
Interesting.
Yeah, like I thought, like yeah, it was gonna be like some kind of like I don't know what to think, but I was like, I don't know what this is, but like I said, I saw the subtitles, like how they spelled out Kevin, and they only say his name just Kevin. They don't say like Kevin Feige or anything. I was like, is this
Yeah.
like a typo in the subtitles or something? But then it clicked when when she met the robot. I was like, oh, he stands for yada yada yada.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but uh, yeah, like so. When She-Hulk goes and meets Kevin Feige, I think she addresses stuff that like we continue talking about in our podcast, especially with like Rainier about like the MCU formula, how
Yeah.
like the endings are always just like a big fight scene and every Marvel project's always the same. And even like She Hulk was like, it doesn't make sense. Like, why have Tatiana and Bruce Banner and like this guy taking the Hulk serum become like the villain? Like, a lot of shit does not make sense.
Yeah.
Like, I think in my head when she was talking about that, it reminded me instantly when like you were talking about like Shang Chi when like there was like that whole like dragon fight scene
Yeah.
at the end. Like I was like, that's so true. A lot of this shit does not make sense. Um,
Yeah.
and then like how like she had like the whole dialogue with like the Kevin robot about like, oh, a formula has to be followed and stuff. And so I was laughing. One, I was laughing because I was enjoying the humor, but two, I think it was just like a really like laugh in front of the face to the fans, and it was just something so different and so fresh and so unexpectedly like similar to like WandaVision that I just felt like invested, and I had a good laugh. And I do agree with both of you guys' points of how like the resolution just came way too fast. Like there was no action or any like way of how I got to the resolution. But I think like everything previously to that, I was just really kind of just like I was like, I'm okay with this. Like I enjoyed it, and I'm okay with like how everything um turns out, because by that point I was like, don't take this show seriously. Like Tatiana's a villain who's a super influencer who probably commits a shit ton of crimes but has many followers. I was like, don't take this show seriously. Let's just let it be and
Yeah.
enjoy it for what it is.
And you're talking about Titania, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What did I say?
You
Who did I
said
say?
Tatiana.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But yeah, what you're saying, a lot of people are agreeing. A lot of people think this episode is genius, and it's getting a lot of praise. A lot of viewers loved this season finale. A lot of viewers didn't, also, like myself and Christian. So very divisive, and definitely discussion worthy. So what else? Yeah, just kind of riffing off of that. I feel like the more I think about it, there is a confrontational aspect to the show. On the surface level, there is a character who speaks to you directly, literally confrontational. She talks right to you. But on a more subtle level, I think it confronts Marvel fans in a way,
Hmm.
right? It challenges us. It asks us these questions about, like, a lot of what we've been talking about. Like, does it have to all be connected? Can we just put out a funny show that you can just watch an episode at a time, and um, it doesn't necessarily need to be building up to anything? It really does confront us. Particularly male viewers like us. I think there's another aspect of the confrontational nature of the show. It addresses toxic fanboys very directly. Yeah, maybe we'll talk about that a little bit. This show, like really no show before it, confronts toxic fanboys. There are toxic fanboy characters in this show, and a lot of what has happened in this show has happened in real life, amazingly. Um, yeah, so I think specifically the toxic fanboys in this show are the organization called Intelligentsia. It's like a 4chan style website where angry men go off on certain topics. Yeah, what did you guys think of Intelligentsia, and how it kind of mirrored real life? Thoughts there. Christian, how about you?
Yeah, like I think one thing that was like really interesting about it that I thought was like we were talking about how like topical and timely this show was with that opinion. It almost felt like it was like topical to like the week, you know? It's almost like, wow, did they come up with that like the week before?
Hmm.
I don't know, it was just harping on the messiness. I don't mean that in like a bad way. I like I do mean that in like a like it felt like you would hear stuff about like people like dissing She-Hulk online. You'd see videos, oh, the show's terrible, yada yada yada.
It's
Oh
like
man, the twerking scene is the worst.
they
And then
were responding to like last week's episode.
yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
did like that about it, and I did find some of the like the jabs like kind of funny. I got a good chuckle out of some of like what you at the intelligentsia meeting in the very last episode, and like kind of what they're talking about, how they're parroting things. That it's like you probably read online, like, well, I would feel the same way if she was a man. And like I think I enjoyed some of the them poking fun at neckbeards. Um and it was like a very confrontational type of humor in that sense. And but I also had to pull myself back, and it's like, well, this could have been a different Marvel show that they probably got this from, unfortunately. This could have been they got some of the stuff from, unfortunately, Captain Marvel or something else
Mm,
like
yeah.
that they may have got at it, and you kind of and it's just the cycle repeating itself all over again
Hmm.
in a sense. I guess that's the more depressing take on this type of humor, but it is kind of good that they finally like they kind of call it out in a way.
Cool, cool. Porfirio, your thoughts on the toxic fanboys?
No, yeah, I enjoyed it. I thought it was really like in your face, like directed to like yeah, like a certain group that was just like Marvel just like acknowledging that group of people and just being like, well, fuck you. We're still rolling in money and stuff like that. But as much as like, I enjoyed like the whole like addressing the toxic fandom stuff, I feel like it was also really like a kind of feminist TV show, like like just for like everyday females, like how She-Hulk was like, like in the very first episode, she was like Bruce Banner was like, you have to control your anger, and then she was like, I'm a female, like we control our anger every day.
Yeah.
There were just like subtle little like hints about like like Bruce Banner's Hulk versus like Jen Walters' Hulk, and even that there's like even like its own like set of gender norms um to what it means to be angry like the Hulk. And so I thought it was really like smart in the writing.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, the writing in the show was very smart and very self-aware and of the moment, definitely. Um, hey, I thought I'd pose this question, you guys. So we keep talking about the confrontational nature of the show. Did you ever feel like you were being attacked or you were being, I don't know, addressed in any way? Um, I had my moments where I thought I was being like pointed out a little bit. Um, yeah, it goes deep into fan culture here, and yeah, some of the stuff that She-Hulk says does seem to be really calling out real life fans. Were there any moments in this show where you felt a little bit, I don't know, attacked, called out? Any of these feelings come up for you guys at all?
Hmm. Yeah, like I guess so. I'll admit that. It's kind of hard to admit, It's like, yeah, I'm totally a neckbeard here, and like there were definitely some, jabs at my what felt like my expense with some of the intelligentsia stuff. I think. I mean, I took the jab well. I think it's funny, and I think it's like, okay, yeah, you got me. You got and fair play, She-Hulk. Even if I haven't used like I wouldn't say some of the things that they were saying in that meeting
Hmm.
or any of that, but I think myself being I think a little more negative on the show and a little more mixed on some of the humor. I do think like I will say like I enjoyed being attacked like that.
There you go. How about you, Porfirio?
I feel like I might have felt like, oh shit, like that's my own like fault, or she's checking on me. Um, I can't think of any specific moment right now, but I feel like I definitely had my moments.
There you go. Yeah, I definitely had a moment or two. So I remember in episode 9 when She-Hulk's talking to the Kevin robot, and she starts to go off on like the Marvel formula, right? Like we've been saying, and she's going off on how like why is it always about daddy issues, right? She talks about Star-Lord having daddy issues with not one but two different fathers, and then Tony Stark and Howard Stark, and then Thor and Loki and Odin. And like I literally have had this conversation before with my wife, and she said the same thing. It's like, why is it always about the dad? Like, what about the mom? And I would be like, but that's just the character. And then I'll bring up like, oh, what about Thor's mom? He had a nice moment with his mom and in Avengers Endgame, right? And it's just like one scene that's like my defense. And that I felt like, oh shit, like, yeah, yeah, they got me there.
That's funny.
Yeah. Um, The other one was oh, and I kind of want to get a little deeper on this too, but we've already talked about episode 9 a lot. But um, in episode 9, we kind of get the rug pulled out from under us, right? Because it set it up so like it's gonna be this like crazy action set piece, bonkers, like throw logic out the window. Like we got Abomination, we got the head of intelligentsia with the serum, and we got um the Hulk shows up, right? And it's just like totally ridiculous. And it's like exactly what we've been talking about so much on this very podcast, right? How like Marvel shows and movies just end really poorly in a lot of ways, and logic kind of gets thrown out the window, and it's just for the sake of getting a battle royale at the end, right? um so the interesting part of this episode is that they set that up, but then boom, it's just like, actually no, She-Hulk is like, enough of this bullshit, and she like breaks the fourth wall like crazy. And the like we've been saying, the episode just kind of ends, right? And there's like no resolution, or there is resolution, but we have no idea like how it got resolved, right? And yeah, I felt pretty unsatisfied, much like what Christian you've voiced here. And I felt like, oh, now, I mean, this episode is pretty fresh on my mind, just aired yesterday, but the more I think about it, like it was done purposefully, right? It was to mess with our heads. It set us up for like the same old Marvel ending, but then boom, no, we're doing something completely different, and ultimately pretty unsatisfying. And again, I think purposefully unsatisfying, just to call out the ridiculousness of your typical Marvel ending, right? So again, I felt kind of called out here, because I've been so staunch about like how great MCU stuff is, and they're just calling it out, saying, well, this the way they end these shows and movies are just garbage, right? And they're just calling it out. And as ridiculous as it was to see, the Hulk, Abomination, this intelligentsia guy, and She-Hulk about to like do battle in this room, it's basically no less ridiculous than a lot of this other stuff we've seen, right? The season finale of Hawkeye, when it's Kate and Clint on the ice rink with all the tracksuit mafia, right? And the two dragons at the end of Shang-Chi. Like, we've seen it time and again where there's just this ridiculous ending, right? And in a way, it was kind of exaggerated here, but ultimately it was kind of no different, right? So um, there is that. Okay. So I feel like one of the messages, one of many messages, I think, in the show is that um, that the fans just need to kind of lighten up. Like, I felt like a lot of times, like a lot of what we talk about in this show is like things should be a certain way, and we're very opinionated. And I think the show is kind of saying, like, why? Why take this shit so seriously? Why just lighten up and
Mm-hmm.
enjoy like a comedic show,
Mm-hmm.
right? So yeah, still kind of processing all this stuff, but I feel like, yeah, maybe that's one of the messages going on here. So I'm kind of rambling here. Any thoughts on any of that?
You,
Hmm. Oh yeah, go for it, Porfirio.
I was gonna say, like, I love the show. The one thing I did not like, and I could have dealt without, was the. I know this is one thing fans liked, but this is one thing I did not like, was the addition of Daredevil. You
Ah,
know,
Ooh.
ah,
you guys know how
Nice
much I love Dare.
segue.
You know how, like, you guys know how much I love Daredevil and the Netflix show and everything, but just the direction they've been taking, like, the Daredevil characters, like, not just this, but like Hawkeye's Kingpin and everything. like it's just a little too Disney, too little like funny, like Daredevil has his moments where it's like, ah ha ha, that's funny, but I felt like Daredevil's addition within the show was just way too comedic. And to me, because again, I love Daredevil. I love the Netflix show. I'm just like, if this is the direction they're gonna have Daredevil in the Disney Plus reboot, please don't make it. Like, I'm just like, don't make it. Then let Daredevil stay in the graveyard with the Netflix, and I'll remember him like that.
Solid point, Porfirio, and good segue because that is exactly what I wanted to get into next, and that is Daredevil. And maybe more than any other aspect in the show, this is very confrontational too, right? It really challenges you. This is a completely different Daredevil. It's the same actor, it's still Charlie Cox, but it's a completely different vibe, a completely different tone. Um, okay, so I don't think I had, well, I know I didn't have as much of a problem as you did, Porfirio. And I think here's what I think they were driving at with this character. I think what they were trying to do was do something of a gender role reversal. I think they were trying to insert Daredevil into this show like female superheroes have been inserted into shows and movies in the past. It made me think of the earlier appearances of Black Widow in the MCU. So when Black Widow first appeared in the MCU, she was very much an object of desire. Matt Murdock in the show is very much an object of Jen Walters' desire. And Black Widow is given a cool action scene in like Iron Man 2. And it was a little bit like um, kind of wedged in, right? She had this moment where she like fights off all these henchmen, right? And it just seemed like she did a little bit over the top, like she does all these acrobatic moves, and in the end, it didn't add up to much. Like it wasn't that necessary, right? So similarly, Daredevil does that in the show, right? There's a scene where he battles all these henchmen, and that scene is very reminiscent of the devil you know
Yeah,
and love, right? Right. It's
yeah.
kind of reminiscent of the Netflix shows. It's like in a dark hallway, and
Hmm.
he does very impressive acrobatic moves, right? But in the end, it's like not very valuable because right after that, She-Hulk just like smashes a bunch of dudes with like a wall, right? And so I think this was all done kind of purposely. It's to show like I said, this gender reversal where like, hey, guess what? We're gonna take a beloved male superhero and give him the female superhero treatment and see how you like it, right? Kind of thing. And I thought it was kind of cool. Like, you know, um, maybe it's because I have a feeling the Daredevil show is going to be nothing like this, and they're just doing something kind of wild with this character right now. Um, and don't worry, we'll get the Daredevil we know and love later. For now, check this shit out. This shit's crazy, right? It's just wild,
Hmm.
and I think ultimately pretty funny. So Christian, what do you think about the Daredevil appearances on this show?
Hmm. Yeah, it's an I'm like still like thinking over your take, Henry. That's an interesting take. I actually didn't think about that about Daredevil before, or about
Right.
Daredevil in the show before.
Uh-huh.
Um, but I think the way I interpreted it, what I saw, I was pretty mixed on how I felt about him personally in the show. You'll love the Netflix show, great, and like I think like I guess I'm gonna compare him to Batman a little bit right here. I think I see them both as very similar because Frank Miller both kind of like rebooted them, both characters, and kind of down a very similar path in the 1980s
Yep.
with like very darker tones in very noir heavy. And I think the Netflix show really captured that Frank Miller feel like really, really well. Uh, And so this one definitely is a different take on Daredevil. He's a lot more swashbuckling. He cracks more jokes. He's much more quippy. And he's got his Silver Age suit on. And
Yeah.
while I've never read any of the older Daredevil comics from that era, um, it feels like they wanted to channel more of that. It feels like a more quippier, lighthearted Daredevil that wasn't nearly as brooding as he was in the Netflix show and of course in the Frank Miller comics. It's much like Batman, and I think it would be like because I've seen this version of Batman in the modern day, kind of with like something more like Lego Batman, where normally he's like dark and brooding like Robert Pattinson, but he's also kind of more lighthearted and fun, like like Lego Batman and Silver Age Batman. And so that's kind of how I personally interpreted it, and that's why they chose the yellow costume for him. Is I think that it was also to kind of really show that this is a different Daredevil. It might be the same character, or it might be the same actor, Charlie Cox, but we want to do a different take. So we're gonna put him in a different suit, and he's gonna act different, and he's gonna feel different essentially. And I think Charlie Cox, I think he's very comfortable in this role, and he's got a lot of charisma, and I think he did well, and I enjoyed seeing him, but I wasn't as big on the take of Daredevil. I think maybe it's me also being the Batman fanboy that I am, but I liked that kind of broodier take
Mhm,
on the broodier noir take on Daredevil from the Netflix
mhm.
show, and I think like because that's so successful, like that's just kind of how I just see this character
Yeah.
Mm.
especially on the big screen. And so that it just and I feel like that's really what set it apart, especially back in Phase 2. You had the lighthearted PG-13 movies, with Guardians, and you had that. And then back then, we actually did think the Netflix stuff was canon. They did reference Avengers
Hmm.
and other like kind of little tidbits.
Mhm.
And so it felt like that was still part of the same canon of the larger MCU. And so like that's Daredevil. That's how I see Daredevil, and that's how he's always been. And the darker tone is really what set him apart. But I think without that edge, it feels like he is missing something a bit when I'm watching him now. And of course, the fight scene did feel a bit more CGI heavy, whereas the his big well-known fight scenes in the show were very, very practical and super hard hitting. And so like I'm mixed, but I really hope they kind of move back towards that Frank Milleriness
Yeah.
in Born Again, especially because it's called Daredevil Born Again, and this is just a one-off, like kind of confrontational gender reversal, like you said, but only fits into this show.
Mhm.
Right on.
Mhm. I didn't like the costume. I'm just gonna say that now. I really did not
Oh,
like. I did
The
not like the ketchup and mustard, man.
I was gonna say the ketchup and mustard costume.
I'm in agreement there. I thought the costume looked like garbage, like bad, and I kind of like the costume in the comics, but it didn't translate well to the TV screen. But yeah, you two aren't alone. I know there are a lot of Daredevil fans out there who were not too thrilled about his portrayal in this show. I think we can go on and on about the show, to be honest. Um, but let's keep it tight and start to wrap things up. Let's get into our ratings. How would you rate She-Hulk season 1 on a scale of 1 to 5?
Well,
Well,
wait, before we get into the ratings, I just want to really fast talk with both of you guys. What do you think they're going to do with She-Hulk next? Is there going to be a season 2? Is she going to be in the MCU? Like in the films? Like um where do you guys see Marvel taking the character next? Is she going to be in Deadpool 3?
good question.
Hmm.
I had some thoughts. Um, yeah, like anything in the MCU, we can expect to see She-Hulk elsewhere. Um, and I think it would be a good move to have her in a more traditional portrayal. I think it's cool that they took all these crazy risks and um, meta takes on the character on this show. Um, but it would be cool to just see her as like kind of a traditional superhero, in an Avengers team up, right? And have her be maybe a little bit more of a serious character. Um, still be in line with this this performance, but um, yeah, not have it be so out there. Um, yeah, like I think that'd be great. That would be in line with the comics too, I think, because the She-Hulk comic was very fourth wall breaking and comedic. But yeah, the stuff that I'm more familiar with in the comics is her in the team ups and the event stuff. And she wasn't, really a comedic character so much in that stuff. We
Mhm.
just saw her like whip whooping some ass, right? Super
Like break
strong.
shit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
breaking shit up, right? So yeah, I that's how I'd like to see her. And that's how I think we're gonna see her. Like the stuff that we're building up to, Secret Wars and whatnot, Kang Dynasty. Um, yeah, we'll probably just see her in like straight up action shit, which I think would be cool.
I think as far as where I'd like to see it, like it's hard to say when we'll get a season 2 of this. I don't know, like I don't think this is confirmed. The only season 2 I think of the Disney Plus shows that it's confirmed really is Loki,
Yep.
that we know of right now. So I think if we see this in maybe Phase 6, maybe, it's really hard to say.
Yeah.
Um, I think outside of team ups, because I would like to see her team ups in say like King Dynasty, Secret Wars, um, or she might be in Born Again, the way Daredevil was here and there, and they're in a relationship.
All
They
right.
might
Mhm.
Yeah.
continue that into Born Again. Um, but like I think if I would see her kind of pop up in other shows, I think it would be kind of cool to see her kind of in the same way they used Daredevil in Spider-Man No Way Home. Like the main character needs a lawyer. Um, who are they gonna go to? And they're a superhero. Oh, well, let's go to She-Hulk. And she gives
Yeah.
her lawyer deposition. She helps them out on the case. She has like her own little like quick subplot, maybe in a Disney Plus show where you can that can be its own episode,
Mhm.
or as like a little moment in a movie. I think like I also like to see her do more lawyer stuff. I'd like to see her defend a client again.
Right on. Yeah, just a little bit further on what I was saying. Um, man, I don't know if we talked about this too much, but the Secret Invasion trailer came out not long ago. I cannot wait for this thing, man. And it shows the scrolls in such a different light, right? The scrolls
Mhm.
we saw in Captain Marvel and in Far From Home, right? And they're for the most part very comedic kind of characters, right? But this is like a whole darker, intense take. That's the shit I want to see. Like, um, I really enjoyed the She-Hulk show, but man, would I love to see her in a completely different light. So that's what I want to see.
Mhm.
All right,
Okay.
on to the ratings. So one being the worst, five being the best. Who wants to start first? Any volunteers? How about Porfirio? Porfirio?
Yeah,
You know?
sure.
Yeah. Okay.
Sure. So after five, I'll give this a four. I really love this show. I thought it was really funny. It was one of the few shows I looked forward to watching every week. Um, I thought it was something really fresh. I haven't liked a show this or besides Miss Marvel. I haven't liked this show this much since probably WandaVision, just because since it doesn't follow the traditional MCU formula. Um, Obviously, like you've heard me talk about like its faults. Every hit now and then, especially with Daredevil, that alone, like how they treat Daredevil is a whole point down. Like, but yeah, I had a lot of fun with the show, and I just liked the whole new something new that they did with She-Hulk, and it was just a really fun take on its fans and on the character.
Excellent. Okay. How about you, Christian?
Hmm. I have a okay, so I'm gonna have a bit of a hard time rating this one, um, because I think like comedy is very subjective, of course. Um,
True.
and this show definitely made me kind of think about what I find funny and kind of where my sense of humor lies. Um, and like I think this show definitely existed outside of my sense of humor and like kind of what I found funny, what I generally find funny. Um, because like I'm glad that you guys were laughing the whole time and that you guys are having a great time. And I think the show is entertaining, and I kind of see the parts that were entertaining, but I didn't really find any of it funny. It just didn't really click with me. Um, but at the same time, I also kind of thought, like I think like I really liked that kind of more hard art edge, especially in my humor. Uh, with stuff like more like Peacemaker and The Boys and like Rick and Morty, South Park, shows like that. I think I found just like a lot more humor in those, whereas like this I felt like just didn't go far enough in a lot of places. And while there were jokes I chuckled at, or like "ha, you got me," I think it's only with that, and I think that coupled with the messy plot, um I will say it was entertaining. Like, I still did watch this week to week, and I enjoyed some parts of the premise. But I think the show just generally, it felt like it just wasn't for me. I think at the end of the day, um, and I think like I don't know, so it's kind of hard to say. Like, would a number rating be too disingenuous for me if I just found it just subjectively not my thing? You know, um, like, if I just gave it a just thumbs down for me, not my thing, is that good, or do you want me to throw out an actual number?
That
Like,
sounds like a bit of a cop out to me.
okay, all right,
Just my opinion. I don't know for you.
all right, hold my feet to the fire here. Okay, because like, okay, hot take here, hot take. Honestly, like I think like it kind of made me groan. I think more than it made me laugh, even if I liked some of the ideas here. Um, and like, cause like I said, like I'm thinking, like I was thinking one on like a lot of occasions. This show, is kind of a one. It just did not fly with me for like most of it. Even if I found it entertaining, I didn't think it was Morbius level bad. I didn't think it was Iron Fist level bad. I think that like I said,
it's
like, but I just like if I think of like, okay, what was my experience? Well, I just didn't really care for it. I didn't like it.
it just wasn't your cup of tea.
Yeah, because like I think it's subjective, and I enjoyed some of the jabs.
Hmm.
I'm not like, I'm not part of the intelligentsia. I'm never, even if I didn't like it, I'm not gonna be like, oh, She-Hulk's the worst character ever, on Reddit or something. So maybe that's also why I'm just and like I will say, even though I didn't like it, I'm really glad that you guys liked it. I'm really glad that you guys had a lot of fun watching it. And I see there's a lot of fans there. I think if I see someone dressed as She-Hulk at the next Comic Con, I think that would be awesome. I would love, I think that would be great. I think that like there is a message here that um probably needs to be said as well. So I guess that is my rating,
A one.
unfortunately.
A one.
Yeah, but
I
it's a kind of a soft one. It feels that's why I said it feels a bit disingenuous to really
I,
give it a 1, but at
I
the
don't
same time,
I don't think me and Christian have ever had like, I mean, I know I've had like opposite ends with Henry, but I don't think me and
mhm.
Christian have ever had like opposite ends when it comes to reviews.
Yeah, I don't think
So
so.
yeah, not for me. That's why I just said, not for me.
Okay.
But
Oh.
there are bright spots there. Like I said, it's not Morbius. I'm not angry saying it's a hard one. I hate this.
That is a very honest take, Christian. I praise you for your honesty.
Mhm.
And it's funny, it kind of uh brings to light the confrontational aspect we've been talking about a lot, because the fact that you're not a fan of the show and you had a lot of problems with it, um got you thinking probably like, oh shoot, if I give this a 1, like, am I one of these dudes now? Like, am I like
Uh,
exactly what the show is talking about?
The
And it confronts you, right? It really kind of
mhm.
calls you out. And yeah, it pretty interesting stuff, right?
Yeah, I know. Like, I don't want this to say anything about me or anything, but
Right.
like I said, I may have taken a jab here and there, and I enjoyed the jabs that were taken.
Right on, right on. Okay, so on my end, I'm gonna go with a 4 out of 5, like Porfirio. Highly enjoyed the season. I will say this, I did have some issues, I think I mentioned, but episode 6 and 9, I definitely had some problems with. Pretty much went through why already, but yeah, I will say that it wasn't a perfect season for me, but there were, even those episodes I think had some bright spots, and the other episodes a lot. I was laughing throughout, and I think I mentioned a lot of specifics. Tatiana Maslany was great, um, and like I've continually been saying, I think it's funny. I really do think it's genuinely funny. But the more I've been thinking about it, I think maybe the top reason why I enjoyed this season so much is that I really did not know what was going to happen next. From from the very beginning of the show, like we've been saying, it confronts you. It's like, whoa, she's talking directly to me. I haven't seen this in a Marvel show before. I haven't seen this in a Marvel movie before. This is weird, and I don't know where this is going. And then after episode 1 finished, I was like, wow, that was great. That's really funny. I enjoyed it. And I really didn't know what was in store for episode 2. And then after episode 2, I was like, bring it on, man. That was great. I want to see the next one. And I don't know what's going to happen. And I think that's the point, one of the many points of the show, that a Marvel show or movie, any show or movie, doesn't have to be a specific thing, right? It can be not formulaic, right? And that was very cool how I just uh, didn't know what was going to happen next. There was a level of excitement there. um, me, I love all this MCU stuff. Well, I love a lot of this MCU stuff, and a lot of it is I kind of know what I'm gonna get. I know there's gonna be certain story beats and a certain type of climactic finish, and I embrace it and I love it. But this show kind of put turned all that upside down, right? And I was like, I don't know what's gonna happen. Um, and I think maybe some folks may have been put off by that a bit, but I found myself really loving that, that not knowing. Yeah. So this has been a good one. A lot of differing opinions, and I think it's great. I think it's great that we're not always on the same page every time.
Hmm.
And with that, we can wrap up the episode. This is farewell from Henry, Christian, and Porfirio.